He got in without looking at the driver. "Good evening." The voice was bright, aggressively cheerful. Female. He closed his eyes. Of course. "How's your night going? Crazy weather, right? I had a passenger earlier who—" "Stop." She paused. He could feel her looking at him in the rearview mirror. "Excuse me?" He rubbed his temple. Her voice was sharp, clear, each word like a small knife chipping at the quiet he'd paid for. "I booked this ride for silence," he said, not opening his eyes. "To think, to breathe." He let his gaze slide to hers in the mirror. Cold. Final. Not to listen to a parrot. The smile vanished from her reflection. "Excuse me?" "You talk," he said flatly, turning to the window, "like a bird that forgot when to stop." Her jaw actually dropped. He watched it happen in the glass. "Did you just call me a parrot?" Her voice pitched higher. "In my own car?" "It fits." She stared at him. He stared back, unmoved. "If you came with a remote, I would have hit mute the second you opened your mouth." Her hands tightened on the wheel. He watched her knuckles go white. Then she laughed. Not a friendly laugh, a dangerous one. "Okay, listen here, Mr. Funeral Suit." She met his eyes in the mirror, direct, unflinching. "You booked my Uber. Not a library, not a meditation chamber. Mine." She leaned forward slightly. "You want silence? Buy yourself a coffin and climb in." Silence. Complete, ringing silence. Joon-hyuk turned his head, slowly, looked at her, really looked. Not amused, not angry. Hooked. No one spoke to him like this. No one had dared in years. People whispered his name in back rooms. They bowed. They calculated every word before letting it leave their mouths. And this woman, this stranger in a beaten-up car, had just told him to climb into a coffin. He turned back to the window as if she no longer existed. But his pulse had quickened. Seo-yeon scoffed under her breath and pulled into traffic, muttering, "Great, another charming customer." She reached for the radio, turned it on. He flinched, just barely, but she saw it in the mirror, and smiled to herself. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. She switched stations. Soft pop, then jazz, then some old-school love song with too many strings. His jaw tightened. "Oh," she said sweetly, innocently, "you don't like music either. Let me guess, you prefer the sound of your own dramatic thoughts." No response. She kept driving. 2 minutes passed, then 3. The silence in the car grew thick, heavy, like a challenge neither of them wanted to lose. Seo-yeon was not the type to lose challenges. "So," she said brightly, "do you always insult people before saying hello, or am I just special?" Nothing. She glanced at him in the mirror. He sat perfectly still, eyes on the city lights sliding past like he was carved from ice, untouchable, unreachable. She shrugged. "Okay, I tried." She focused on the road for exactly 30 seconds. Then, "You know, I once had a guy try to pay me to just listen to him breathe for 20 minutes. You're still not the weirdest passenger I've had." His fingers twitched. She saw it. Her lips curved. Good. Behind his silence, Kang Joon-hyuk was burning with irritation. He'd spent the entire day in meetings, endless voices, endless arguments, endless people wanting something from him. He'd left his driver, his security, his entire apparatus behind on purpose. He needed 1 hour. 1. And somehow he'd ended up trapped in a car driven by a woman who talked like silence had personally offended her. "Are you done?" he asked coldly. She blinked, surprised. "Oh, you do speak." "I asked if you are done." "With what?" "With all of this," he gestured vaguely, as if her entire existence was the problem. She laughed. Actually laughed. "Sir, you ordered a ride, not a mute button." He stared at her. "Do you always talk this much?" "Only when people are rude," she shot back, "and when they look like they're about to bite someone." "I am not rude," she snorted. "You called me a parrot." A very accurate observation. She shook her head, grinning despite herself. Wow, and here I was thinking today couldn't get any better. Then stop talking. No. The word came out light, playful, but firm. He frowned slightly. Actually frowned, a crack in the ice. You are very bold for someone who works in customer service. And you're very grumpy for someone in a suit that probably costs more than my car. His eyes flicked briefly to the cracked dashboard, then back to her. This car is modest. Hey, she sounded mildly offended. She has a name. He paused. Your car? Yes, don't judge her. I wasn't. You were. He went silent again. She waited. 5 seconds, 10, then sighed. You know, you're really bad at this whole mysterious thing. You just look constipated. That did it. His eyes snapped at hers in the mirror, sharp, startled. What did you say? She smiled innocently. I said you look like you're holding in a very serious thought. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, against every instinct, against every rule he'd built for himself, the corner of his mouth twitched. Just a little. He turned away quickly, annoyed with himself. But Seo-yeon noticed. She grinned wider. Oh, there it is. You do have a face under all that funeral energy. Watch the road, he muttered. I am. She lifted both hands off the wheel for half a second, then grabbed it again. See? Both hands. Happy? Immature. Chronically, she agreed. They drove the rest of the way in silence. But it wasn't the same kind of silence anymore. When they finally pulled up to his destination, a building that looked more like a fortress than an office, she said, That'll be $28.50. He handed his card without a word. She took it, paused, looked at him, then at the card. Her eyes widened just a fraction before she caught herself. Wow, she said carefully. Either you're very rich or very committed to pretending. He took the card back before she could think too much about it. Keep the change, he said. She blinked. There is no change. Exactly. He opened the door, stopped, looked back at her one last time. You, he said quietly, are exhausting. She smiled, brightly. And you're welcome. He hesitated, half a second, no more, then stepped out and closed the door. Seo-yeon watched him walk away, shoulders straight, posture perfect, like a man who owned the world. Rude, but interesting. She didn't notice that across the street, Kang Joon-hyuk had stopped and was looking back at her car for longer than he intended.
Han Se-yeon pulled back into traffic and tried to forget about Mr. Funeral Suit. She couldn't, because 20 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a new ride request. Same name, same pickup location. She stared at the screen, blinked. You've got to be kidding me. She almost declined. Her finger hovered over the button. Then she thought about rent, about her mother's medication refill tomorrow, about the weird noise her engine had started making last week. She accepted. When she pulled up, he was standing exactly where she'd left him. Same posture, same cold expression, like he'd been frozen in place, waiting. He got in without a word. She watched him in the mirror. You again? Yes. Did you forget something? No. Then why drive? She bit back about 15 different responses and pulled onto the street. Fine. If he wanted to pay for silence, she'd give him silence. For approximately 45 seconds. So, she said, unable to help herself, did you come back to apologize for calling me a bird, or are you here for round 2? I am here because you were the closest available driver. And I'm the Queen of England. He said nothing, just stared out the window like the city held answers she couldn't see. She drummed her fingers on the wheel. You know, normal people say hello when they get in a car. Silence. They also say thank you when the ride's over, maybe even have a nice night. More silence. She sighed dramatically. Okay, fine. Be mysterious. It's working great for you. His eyes closed briefly. She saw his jaw tighten. Do you, he said slowly, carefully, ever stop talking? Do you ever stop scowling? His eyes opened, met hers in the mirror. For 3 long seconds, they just looked at each other. Then she grinned. Where did you learn to be like this, anyway? Like what? Like someone replaced your personality with a terms and conditions agreement. Something flickered across his face, too fast to read. Public transportation, she added helpfully. That's where I learned. You meet all kinds. Angry people, sad people, people who think they're better than everyone else. She glanced at him meaningfully. People who tip too much because they think money fixes rudeness. I wasn't rude. You called me a parrot. An observation. A rude one. Accurate observations, he said, are rarely polite. She laughed despite herself. Actually laughed. Oh my God, you actually believe that, don't you? He didn't answer, but she caught it again, that tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth, like his face wanted to smile, but forgot how. They hit a red light. The car stopped. Rain drummed on the roof. He glanced at her, then looked away quickly. You're very comfortable, he said. With what? With speaking to strangers. She shrugged. Strangers are easier. They don't expect much. There was something in her tone, something soft, unguarded, that made him look at her again, but she'd already slipped the cheerful mask back on. Besides, silence makes things awkward. I hate awkward. I like silence. Of course you do. I rolled my eyes. You probably eat dinner alone in a dark room and call it peaceful. He almost smiled. You don't know me, he said. No, she agreed, but I'm getting a pretty clear picture. The light turned green. She accelerated smoothly. Rich, antisocial, probably works too much. Definitely doesn't have a pet because pets require affection. She ticked items off on one hand while steering with the other. Sleeps 4 hours a night, drinks black coffee, has an assistant who's terrified of you. He stared at her. She glanced at him. How'd I do? You missed several important details. Like what? That is none of your business. She grinned. Ouch. Okay, then what do you do for fun? He didn't answer. She nodded knowingly. Let me guess. You stare into the distance and judge humanity. He exhaled slowly through his nose, the sound of a man exercising tremendous patience. She laughed. I'm kidding, mostly. They hit another red light. She stopped. He checked his phone, frowned. You missed a turn, he said. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. She looked at the GPS. Nope, this way is faster. He looked at her directly. I prefer the other route. Well, she said cheerfully, pulling forward as the light changed, we're already committed, like a bad relationship. He stared at her for a long moment. You are very... He paused, searching for the word. Annoying, she offered. Persistent. Oh, she brightened. Thank you. That was not a compliment. I'll survive. They drove on. Joon-hyuk sat in the back seat and felt something unfamiliar, irritation mixed with something else, something he couldn't name. She was loud, intrusive, completely inappropriate, and she looked at him like he was just a man, not a title, not a threat, not a king in a glass tower, just a very grumpy customer in the back seat of an Uber. It unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Are you always this talkative with passengers? He asked. Only the rude ones. I am not. You are absolutely rude. I met his eyes in the mirror. But I've dealt with worse. Last week, a guy tried to get me to stop at 3 different fast food places because he couldn't decide. At least you know what you want. And what is that? Silence, control, probably world domination. His expression didn't change, but she swore she saw something like amusement in his eyes. You're wrong, he said. About which part? That is none of your business. She grinned. Ouch. Okay, then what do you do for fun? He didn't answer. She nodded knowingly. Let me guess. You stare into the distance and judge humanity. He exhaled slowly through his nose, the sound of a man exercising tremendous patience. She laughed. I'm kidding, mostly. They hit another red light. She stopped. He checked his phone, frowned. You missed a turn, he said. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. She looked at the GPS. Nope, this way is faster. He looked at her directly. I prefer the other route. Well, she said cheerfully, pulling forward as the light changed, we're already committed, like a bad relationship. He stared at her for a long moment. You are very... He paused, searching for the word. Annoying, she offered. Persistent. Oh, she brightened. Thank you. That was not a compliment. I'll survive. They drove on. Joon-hyuk sat in the back seat and felt something unfamiliar, irritation mixed with something else, something he couldn't name. She was loud, intrusive, completely inappropriate, and she looked at him like he was just a man, not a title, not a threat, not a king in a glass tower, just a very grumpy customer in the back seat of an Uber. It unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Are you always this talkative with passengers? He asked. Only the rude ones. I am not. You are absolutely rude. I met his eyes in the mirror. But I've dealt with worse. Last week, a guy tried to get me to stop at 3 different fast food places because he couldn't decide. At least you know what you want. And what is that? Silence, control, probably world domination. His expression didn't change, but she swore she saw something like amusement in his eyes. You're wrong, he said. About which part? That is none of your business. She grinned. Ouch. Okay, then what do you do for fun? He didn't answer. She nodded knowingly. Let me guess. You stare into the distance and judge humanity. He exhaled slowly through his nose, the sound of a man exercising tremendous patience. She laughed. I'm kidding, mostly. They hit another red light. She stopped. He checked his phone, frowned. You missed a turn, he said. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. She looked at the GPS. Nope, this way is faster. He looked at her directly. I prefer the other route. Well, she said cheerfully, pulling forward as the light changed, we're already committed, like a bad relationship. He stared at her for a long moment. You are very... He paused, searching for the word. Annoying, she offered. Persistent. Oh, she brightened. Thank you. That was not a compliment. I'll survive. They drove on. Joon-hyuk sat in the back seat and felt something unfamiliar, irritation mixed with something else, something he couldn't name. She was loud, intrusive, completely inappropriate, and she looked at him like he was just a man, not a title, not a threat, not a king in a glass tower, just a very grumpy customer in the back seat of an Uber. It unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Are you always this talkative with passengers? He asked. Only the rude ones. I am not. You are absolutely rude. I met his eyes in the mirror. But I've dealt with worse. Last week, a guy tried to get me to stop at 3 different fast food places because he couldn't decide. At least you know what you want. And what is that? Silence, control, probably world domination. His expression didn't change, but she swore she saw something like amusement in his eyes. You're wrong, he said. About which part? That is none of your business. She grinned. Ouch. Okay, then what do you do for fun? He didn't answer. She nodded knowingly. Let me guess. You stare into the distance and judge humanity. He exhaled slowly through his nose, the sound of a man exercising tremendous patience. The next evening, Seo-yeon sat in her car outside the glass tower and wondered if she was making a mistake. Rich people were unpredictable. Generous one moment, cruel the next. She'd learned that the hard way. But rent was due in 3 days, and her mother's prescription needed refilling tomorrow. Her phone buzzed. Passenger arriving. She watched him walk out. Same suit, different tie, same expression that looked like it had been carved from marble and left out in the cold. He got in. She glanced at him in the mirror. Evening? Drive. She bit her tongue and pulled into traffic. For exactly 1 minute, she gave him what he wanted. Silence. Then she reached for the radio. His hand shot forward, stopping just short of grabbing her wrist. Don't. She looked at his hand, then at him. Slowly, deliberately, she turned the radio on. Soft jazz filled the car. He closed his eyes like she'd physically wounded him. She smiled and changed the station. Pop music, then news, then some dramatic orchestral piece that sounded like the soundtrack to his entire personality. "Oh," she said sweetly, "you don't like this either? I'm starting to think you just don't like anything." "I like silence." "You mentioned that several times." She switched stations again. "What about this one? Classic rock, very manly, very brooding." His jaw clenched. "Turn it off." "Make me." The words hung in the air between them. He opened his eyes, looked at her in the mirror. She looked back, challenging, fearless. Neither of them moved. Then, very quietly, he said, "You're enjoying this. Immensely. Why?" "Because you're so easy to annoy." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "You," he said slowly, "are a problem." "Good." She turned the radio down, just a little. Problems are more interesting than silence. They drove for another block. Then he said, almost against his will, "What kind of passenger am I?" She blinked, surprised. "What?" "You said you've had worse. I want to know where I rank." She studied his reflection. "Are you serious?" "I don't ask questions I don't want answered." She thought about it. "Okay, you're a 7. His eyebrow lifted. "Out of?" 10. 10 being the guy who threw up in my backseat. 1 being the old lady who paid me $50 to drive her to the grocery store and back while she told me about her grandkids. "And I'm a 7? "Yep. Rude, but you pay well. Annoying, but not disgusting. Cold, but—" She trailed off. "But what?" She met his eyes in the mirror. "But I don't think you're as cold as you pretend to be." Silence. Real silence this time. He looked away first. "You don't know me," he said quietly. "No," I agreed, "but I'm starting to." The car hit a pothole. The engine made a horrible grinding noise, metal on metal, wrong and violent. She winced. "Sorry, she's been doing that." He frowned. "How long?" "A week? Maybe 2? That's not safe." "Yeah, well, safe costs money." "Get it fixed." "Oh, sure. Let me just pull a new engine out of my pocket." She shook her head. "I'll fix it when I can afford it." "And if it dies before then?" "Then I'll figure it out. I always do." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion she tried to hide, the shadows under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. She worked too hard, slept too little, carried too much, and somehow still smiled. It bothered him. He didn't know why. "What's your mother's condition?" Her hands tightened on the wheel. "How did you—" "You mentioned her prescription earlier." "I did?" She didn't remember saying that. It's nothing. She's fine." "You're lying." She glanced at him sharply. "That's none of your business." "You're right." He looked out the window. "It isn't." But he'd already decided he would find out anyway. They reached another red light. The city hummed around them, neon signs bleeding color into rain-slicked streets, people rushing past with umbrellas, the constant pulse of Seoul at night. "You know what's weird?" she said suddenly. "What?" "You keep booking me, same time every day, but you hate talking." "I don't hate it." "You literally paid me to shut up." "I asked. I didn't pay." "You tipped 600%. "That was for the service." "The service of me being quiet?" "Among other things." She shook her head, grinning. "You're the strangest regular I've ever had." "You have other regulars?" "A few. There's Mrs. Kim, she goes to physical therapy 3 times a week, Mr. Park, who works night shifts at the hospital, and now you, the grumpy rich guy who tips like he's apologizing for existing." "I'm not apologizing." "Then what are you doing?" "Good question." He didn't have an answer. The light turned green. She drove. After a while, she said, "You're not going to tell me, are you?" "Tell me what?" what you actually do, why people in that building look at you like you're important. I am important. Wow, modest, too. It's not arrogance, if it's true. It's definitely still arrogance. He looked at her. She looked back. And for the first time since he'd gotten in her car, he felt something that wasn't irritation or control. He felt unseen. Not feared, not obeyed, just seen. It was dangerous. They pulled up to his building. She put the car in park. Same price unless you're feeling extra generous tonight. He handed her 3 20s. Keep it. That's keep it. She took the money slowly. You know this is weird, right? This whole thing. What thing? You booking me every day, overpaying, sitting back there like you're analyzing me. I'm not analyzing you. You absolutely are. He opened the door, paused. You're tolerable. She blinked. Was that a compliment? Don't let it go to your head. Too late. I'm adding it to my resume. Tolerable to mysterious rich people. He stepped out, started to close the door, then stopped, looked back at her. Tomorrow, he said. It wasn't a question. She raised her eyebrow. You're really committing to this whole regular customer thing? Consistency is efficient. Uh-huh, sure. He held her gaze for one more second, then closed the door and walked away. Seo-yeon sat there, watching him disappear into his fortress. Tolerable, she muttered. What a romantic. But she was smiling, and she didn't notice that he'd stopped just inside the building's entrance, or that he was standing there, hand on the glass door, looking back at her car. His assistant approached. Sir, the meeting is postponed. But 10 minutes. The assistant bowed and retreated. Joon-hyuk stood there and watched her drive away, watched until her taillights disappeared into Seoul's glowing chaos. Then he pulled out his phone, typed a message to his head of security. I need information on someone. Han Seo-yeon, driver. Send me everything. He stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. This was foolish, unnecessary. She was just a driver, just a woman who talked too much and smiled too easily and looked at him like he was just a man. He put his phone away, walked to his office, sat behind his desk, picked up his phone again, and sent the message. Because Kang Joon-hyuk didn't believe in coincidence, or loose ends, or complications he couldn't control, and Han Seo-yeon was becoming all three. By morning, he'd know everything about her. Her address, her debts, her mother's medical history, her secrets. Everything. He told himself it was just due diligence, risk assessment, basic security protocol. He almost believed it.
Seo-yeon pulled up to the glass tower at exactly 7:47 p.m. He was already waiting. She didn't know why that made her stomach flip, but it did. He got in, same seat, same cold silence. Good evening, she said. Drive. She grinned. You know, most people eventually learn my name. I know your name. Then use it. He looked at her in the mirror. Drive, Seo-yeon. Her name sounded different in his mouth, precise, careful, like he'd practiced saying it. She pulled into traffic, heart beating just a little faster than it should. Better, she said. Day 4. You're early, she said when he got in. The meeting ended early. So you just waited? Yes. For me? He didn't answer, which was an answer. She smiled and started driving. Bad day? She asked after a while. Why do you ask? You're doing that thing with your jaw again, the clenching thing. He unclenched it. I'm fine. Liar. He almost smiled. You're very observant for someone who talks constantly. I can multitask, talk and observe. It's a gift. It's annoying. You keep saying that, yet you keep booking me. He said nothing, but he didn't deny it either. Day 5. She was running late. Traffic had been a nightmare, and her car had made that horrible noise twice on the way over. She pulled up 10 minutes past pickup time, already composing an apology. He got in without a word.
I'm sorry, she said quickly. Traffic was… I know, I saw. She blinked. You saw? I have the same app you do. Right, of course. He could track her location. Somehow that felt more intimate than it should. Still, she said, I'm usually on time. You're here now. They drove in comfortable silence for once. Then he said, Your car is getting worse. She'd been hoping he wouldn't notice. It's fine. The noise is louder than yesterday. I'll get it fixed. When? When I can afford it. That's not an answer. She gripped the wheel tighter. It's the only answer I have. He studied her reflection, saw the tension, the worry she tried to hide. How much? He asked quietly. How much what? To fix it. I don't know. Haven't gotten an estimate yet. Get one. Why? Because you're going to hurt yourself driving a broken car. She glanced at him. You worried about me? I'm worried about being stranded when this car dies mid-route. Wow, so caring. But she was smiling, and so was he, almost. Day 7. Tell me something, she said. No. You don't even know what I'm going to ask. It doesn't matter, the answer is no. She laughed. Come on, one personal question, just one. He sighed. What? Do you have any friends? No. Family? No. Hobbies? No. Wow, she shook her head. You're either the loneliest person I've ever met, or you're lying. Both can be true. The honesty surprised her. She looked at him in the mirror. He was looking back. What about you? He asked. What about me? Friends? Family? Hobbies? She smiled sadly. My mom, that's it. She's all I have. And when you're not driving strangers around? I'm at the hospital, or home, or… She trailed off. Honestly, this is the most interesting part of my day. Driving me. Yeah, weird, right? Very. But he didn't look away. Day 10. She picked him up from a different location this time, not the glass tower. A restaurant, expensive, the kind with a doorman. He got in and she smelled expensive cologne, wine, something else, perfume that wasn't his. Date night? She asked lightly. Business dinner. With someone who wears Chanel No. 5? His eyes narrowed. How did you… My mom used to wear it before she got sick. She pulled into traffic. So, business dinner with a woman who wears expensive perfume. Sounds romantic. It wasn't. Did she think it was? He was quiet for a moment. Probably. And you just let her think that? I didn't encourage it. That's not the same as discouraging it. He looked at her. Are you judging me? A little bit. Why? Because leading people on is cruel, even if you think you're being professional. I don't lead people on. Then what do you call tonight? Business. Right, business, with wine and perfume and candlelight. There was no candlelight. There was, wasn't there? He said nothing. She grinned. Thought so. They drove in silence for a while. Then he said, What would you have done? If what? If I were you tonight. She thought about it. I would have been honest, told her it was just business, even if it made things awkward. And if that ruined the business opportunity, then it wasn't a real opportunity, just manipulation dressed up as networking. He studied her carefully. You have very strong opinions about honesty. Yeah, well, I've been lied to enough to know what it costs. Something in her voice made him lean forward slightly. Who lied to you? She glanced at him, surprised by the question. That's personal. You ask me personal questions all the time. That's different. How? Because I'm just your driver. You're you. She gestured, vaguely, at him. And who am I? She looked at him in the mirror. Really looked. I don't know yet, she said honestly, but I'm starting to think you're not as scary as you want people to believe. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. You should be scared, he said quietly. Why? Because I'm not a good man, Seo-yeon. The way he said her name, like a warning and an apology at once, made her heart skip. I don't believe that, she said. You should. They reached his building. He didn't get out right away, just sat there looking at her in the mirror. What? She asked. You're different. Different how? You look at me like I'm just a person. You are just a person. No, he said quietly. I'm not. He got out before she could respond. She watched him walk away, and for the first time, she wondered if maybe she should be scared. But she wasn't. Day 14. By the end of week 2, it wasn't a pattern anymore. It was a routine. He booked her every evening, same time, sometimes different locations, but always the same destination, home. They argued about music, about traffic routes, about politics and food, and whether silence was really better than conversation. She told him about her passengers, the crying businessman, the college student who'd left his wallet in her car, the old couple celebrating their 50th anniversary. He listened, actually listened. Sometimes he asked questions, small ones, nothing too personal, but he was learning her, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the way she bit her lip when she was worried, the little sighs she made when she was tired. And she was learning him, too, the way his shoulders relaxed when he got in her car, the way he almost smiled when she made a joke, the way he looked at her sometimes, like he was a puzzle he couldn't solve. One night she said, "You know you're my weirdest regular, right? You've mentioned that. I mean it, though. I have other regulars, but none of them are like you. Like me, how? I don't know. Mysterious, intense, rich enough to have a driver, but choose to use Uber." She glanced at him. "It's weird. I prefer your route." "My route?" "The way you drive. It's unpredictable." She laughed. "That's because I'm avoiding potholes. My car can't handle much more damage." His expression darkened. "You still haven't gotten it fixed." "I told you." "I know, you can't afford it." He was quiet for a moment. "What if someone offered to pay?" "Then I'd say no." "Why?" "Because I don't take charity." "It wouldn't be charity." "Then what would it be?" He didn't have an answer. She pulled up to his building, put the car in park. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. He looked at her. "Yes. You know, eventually people are going to think we're friends." "Are we?" The question hung in the air. She thought about it. "I don't know. Are we?" He opened the door, paused. "No. Friends would be simpler." He got out and walked away, and Seo-yeon sat there, hands still on the wheel, and realized something terrifying. She was starting to look forward to these rides. To him. And that was dangerous, because men like him, cold, powerful, mysterious men who tipped too much and never smiled, they didn't become friends with girls like her. They didn't become anything. But her heart didn't seem to care about logic, and neither, it seemed, did his, because the next morning she woke up to a message from an unknown number. "Your car needs immediate repair. I've scheduled an appointment at a trusted mechanic. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., non-negotiable." She stared at the screen. Typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "You know who." She did. And despite everything, despite knowing she should be angry, should refuse, should keep this professional, she smiled.